Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome to my channel. I know it has been over a month again since I last did a video, but because I have a 4-volume book going to be published on the 6th of August this year, 1.5 million words, there's not really much time in my day for anything else but, proofreading and formatting like one final time through that, final draft. But because this is Mental Health May or Mental Health Awareness May, I'm going to be doing at least one video for that, as I promised fairly recently. I have been participating in this readathon on booktube for the last couple of years. It's hosted by Kim at Middle of the Book March and Marilyn Maya Mendoza. I will put links to both of their channels down below. I really love this readathon. It's so important to call attention to mental health and all sorts of related issues. I'm overdue to put together a playlist of the videos I've done for it over the last few years, and I do profusely apologize. I don't think I've mentioned them as the hosts in my prior videos because not all my videos were related to books about mental health. It was just using it as a general prompt to talk about, my own history and struggles with mental health issues, and I have reviewed books related to mental health and such like that. So I do apologize for that. And so anyway, this is going to be based off of a blog post which I just published yesterday, the 27th of May 2026, Aleksandr Isayevich's life experiences and his mental health, respectful conjectures. This is also part of the on and off again. It's not really a regular release schedule yet, but my favorite writer, Aleksandr Isayevich Solzhenitsyn, I love so much about him, but as the title suggests, it's not really going to be blow by blow biographical information about him or his controversial statements he made in the second half of his life when he was in the West and then went back to Russia, or my suspicions, theories about why a lot of people both in the West and his native Russia wrote him off as a reactionary has-been. Those are all going to be the subject of their own future videos. I'm just going to be generally talking about how could his really traumatic the life experiences and the anxiety of the being stalked by the Soviet Union and isolation in the West with basically only his immediate family have impacted him as a person mentally, psychologically, and particularly in the books he published in the final decades of his life. And I do apologize again because I've been so out of practice with making videos if I seem more nervous than usual. I'm talking even faster. I know that's a terrible habit. I still haven't gotten that completely under control, but let's stop babbling and get on with it. Hopefully you're still watching. Though I'm not a psychologist and would never armchair diagnose anyone. I'm not Beatrice Sparks, who I rant about in so many other videos. Mental Health Awareness Month is the perfect time to reflect on how pivotal life experiences of my favorite writer, Aleksandr Isayevich Solzhenitsyn, undoubtedly had a potent psychological influence upon him. Seriously, no one can come through that kind of trauma and isolation unaffected. Aleksandr Isayevich was a posthumous child, born 6 months after his father died in a hunting accident. His mother never remarried, and he was raised by her and an aunt in very difficult circumstances. And his mother also died. She was 49 years old. So, of course, he was an adult by that point, but still, it wasn't she was around until he was 50 or something like that, many other people can almost take for granted in the modern era. Under the new Soviet regime, he was born in December of 1918. Their family had to hide their upper-class origins, his father's service in the Imperial Russian Army under the Tsar, of course, and their Orthodox Christian faith. So, that's going to cause, a lot of, stress. Oh, are they going to find out we're secretly, religious? Oh, what would happen? And his mother actually was dismissed from at least one job when her, true, background came to light. I'm sorry if I'm, stuttering. I'm having a lot of, cursor lag when I'm trying to freaking do this. This threefold challenge of growing up without a father, without guaranteed financial stability, and under the stress and uncertainty of totalitarian rule may have made him strong and self-reliant, particularly from his generation. Oh, you just got on with it. You didn't talk about difficult things because that prevented you from just living your life. What are you, a sissy, a crybaby? Just move on. Who cares about psychological claptrap, many people would have said. But such experiences in one's formative years shape who we become and leave permanent marks. The brain is so plastic at that age, not nearly finished developing yet. As we know now, the final bits of brain development, they don't finish until we're about 25 years old. Trauma and stress rewire the brain, even if we're not consciously aware of it. Then he served in World War II and the front lines, which added even more impossible to escape psyche-shaping experiences, and witnessed his comrades committing vile sexual crimes against German and Polish women, as described in his long poem Prussian Nights. That's one of the works I'm going to be talking about when I do some more videos about him. In February 1945, he was arrested, held and interrogated in the infamous Lubyanka prison in Moscow, and sentenced to 8 years in Gulag. And on that July, he was sentenced after all those months of being interrogated. And his so-called crime was laughing, making negative comments about Stalin in a letter to a friend. So basically Stalin had eyes everywhere. It didn't even have to be publicly denouncing him. You could just privately say some euphemistic comments and bang, you're off to the gulag, man. I've become aware of people shamefully trying to discredit his gulag experiences as not that bad and mostly spent in a sharashka, a secret scientific facility with very good living conditions, the setting of The First Circle, the first book of his which I ever read. Some people even claim he never was there or gulag didn't exist, which that takes historical revisionism to a whole nother effed up level. Some of these naysayers are regurgitating Soviet-era propaganda, including citing his ex-wife's book against him, which, whatever. Maybe he did have affairs. I wasn't in their marriage. I never personally knew either of them. But, beyond that, she's saying, oh, the Gulag Archipelago is a work of, folk tales and pure, fantasy, and it wasn't that bad. But guess what? That was part of a coordinated, propagandistic campaign by the KGB. She later remarried someone who very, very probably was in the KGB himself. So you're saying KGB sponsored propaganda is 100% gospel truth just because, oh, his wife said it. His wife was never in the gulag. This is just you're regurgitating Soviet propaganda. Give your damn head a shake. Do you even remember what life was like in that era? Seriously. And then while others of these people regurgitating the propaganda, they just want to tear him down as a person for various reasons, oh, he was a dinosaur and a has-been, a ultra-conservative ideologue, blah blah blah. Regardless, he never pretended to have the kind of brutal experience described in Varlam Shalamov's Kalima Tales, a short story collection, and Shalamov famously publicly beefed with him because the Zeki, prisoners, in Aleksandr Isayevich's books have fairly decent food, clothes, living quarters, and work assignments, and they're actually treated in the hospital instead of just injected with too much morphine or ignored until they're too far gone to have any medical help. An 8-year sentence in camps, prisons, and a sharashka isn't any less traumatic than 20 years in the worst, deadliest camps in Kalima. It's like saying a Shoah survivor who spent the entire war in a transit camp like Westerbork in the Netherlands, or a so-called model camp like Terezin, and a forced labor factory run by the Wehrmacht, suffered less than someone who went through 5 camps and ghettos and narrowly escaped mass graves and such. Their experience is different for many, many reasons, but the suffering, trauma, and uncertainty were the same. What is this, a contest between who suffered more? Oh, you weren't in the depths of despair, so therefore gulag couldn't really be that bad. There are different levels of suffering within that system. It was all terrible. Aleksandr Isayevich came very close to dying in the 50s because, despite a tumor having been removed, he wasn't diagnosed with cancer or given treatment until 1954. Going through cancer and being so sick, coming close to the death's door, added even more traumatic experiences. And I've seen more Kremlbots, as one of the terms for them, Soviet propaganda, the kind of the hammer and sickle in their profile in their screen name or something like that. They're saying, oh, he got free medical treatment by the Soviet Union and he stabbed them in the back. That's an interesting confession. Are you saying you actually like Stalin? Oh, don't really answer that. I know tankies exist. His first wife divorced him in 1952 after having been apart since 1941, and they remarried in 1957. Their marriage unraveled again, and they divorced anew in 1973. He'd already gotten involved with his, the woman who became his second wife, some time before that. They had all of their children by the time the divorce came through. During all these years, there was the inescapable stress of life under Soviet rule, even during the Khrushchev thaw of the late 50s and early 60s, and of course after Khrushchev was dismissed, like Soviet repression like really like ramped up fresh. I know, and I'm sorry for the pauses. My cursor is being a dick. In 1974, he was kicked out of the USSR after the Gulag Archipelago came to light, the manuscript, and his second wife, their 3 sons, his stepson from his wife's first marriage, and his mother-in-law, who was his own age, followed because his second wife was, who is still living, by the way, is 20 years younger than he was. After escaping Soviet repression and assassination attempts, the family lived first in West Germany, where they were like told to go like right to, followed by the Hoover Tower on the Stanford campus, like invited to like live in the United States for as long as the exile should last, because he was stripped of the Soviet citizenship. He needed some safe refuge. Aleksandr Isayevich toured the east coast of the U.S. in 1976, the year he settled in Cavendish, Vermont. Though there were some public speaking engagements, like at a Russian Orthodox church in New Jersey and Harvard's 1978 commencementism address to the West, he largely kept to himself for the remainder of his exile. Everyone who lived through COVID lockdown knows what it's like to be confined to one's home and only have meaningful contact with the other people living there. Lockdown ruined my mental health and destroyed my writing progress and motivation for a very long time, as I've discussed in a few other videos. Those deprivations had an even bigger psychological impact on Gen Z and Gen Alpha, who couldn't go to school in person. And in many ways, a lot of people feel like they're still recovering from that, if they have like recovered at all. But like, I don't want to like get too far off topic about that, but I do feel like many people agree on both sides of the political. A lot of the like the public response to COVID, it was mismanaged at best. I can kind of understand, like, we really didn't understand what was happening or the best course of action, but I just really feel it really did hurt a lot of people's mental health because of this like enforced like lockdown and like don't interact with other people, can't even go to school in person, such like that. However, Aleksandr Isayevich isolated himself voluntarily. He was known as a local recluse and hermit because he went out so rarely and lived behind a barbed wire fence. At least in the USSR, despite all the repression, he at least interacted with many different people. Like, for example, in his memoir, The Oak and the Calf, he talks about all the writers he was friends with. In Vermont, he did little but research, write, and talk to his immediate family. His wife and sons learned English and became American citizens. His 3 sons still live in the U.S., while Russian remained his only language. He understood some English, and I was reading recently, he did like read like English literature a bit, but again, it wasn't like the language he decided to, I have to become fluent and I'm going to start writing in English and talking to people in English, because he was only staying at home to read and to write and research, but he avoided learning it to fluency, despite insisting his sons become fluent so they could fully participate in American life. So I'm going to get into that way more in the future video, talking about like why many people feel like, he's a dinosaur and a has-been. Look at all these reactionary statements he's making. But like, he wasn't nearly like what they depict him as. Like, he understood his own sons. He was an older father. Like I said his wife was 20 years younger than he was, but they were like 30 and 50 when they got together. So it's not like he was like perving on a girl who was like barely a legal adult, like both grown-ass adults, like consenting adults, because his, sons were so much younger. He kind of understood, they're going to be, and we live in America now, so they're going to be taking part in the dominant culture, and I want them to become like real Americans, learn English. I'm sending my boys to local school. So it's not like he railed against like every single thing about modern life. Like, he didn't like it, but he understood his own sons were going to do it. He lived like this because he desperately needed to feel safe after all that intense Sturm und Drang, and he more than appreciated the uninterrupted chance to research and write full-time. But it was this very isolation that doubtless played the biggest role in how his massive Red Wheel saga, I have a separate video about that, I will link to it at the end of this video, only spanned 1914 through 1917 and is bloated beyond belief with the kind of clutter any competent editor or even beta readers and crit partners would have called out as unnecessary. Gone were all the other writers he shared his work with, like he did in the Soviet Union. Also, that isolation doubtless intensified any pre-existing social, cultural, religious, and political views out of step with mainstream modern Western sensibilities. Like, even among his fellow conservatives, that's like kind of saying a lot. And so, like, as another sneak preview, I'm sorry, I'm like getting a little bit too off topic so many times, but of his that future video I'm doing, like why many people dismissed him as a has-been, like, oh, dinosaur, like who cares about him, is because he failed to conform as the perfect poster boy for their various causes. Like, for example, the conservatives at the time were thinking, yeah, he's anti-communist, he's one of our guys, but hey, wait a minute, he doesn't want communism to be replaced by democracy either. Like, what in the world is like going on? So like you really could just not put one separate kind of label on him. He was not like 100% the poster boy for any of these causes people wanted him to be for. And so again, he had no one outside his immediate family to exchange ideas and debate with, and thus had little chance to understand what he was actually speaking against. Though to his credit, he didn't object when his sons listened to the modern music he railed against as helping to destroy the West. I recently read an interview with his son Ignat, like, oh, they brought home Black Sabbath records and heavy metal, and he wasn't like, oh no, terrible, you boys, how could you do this? I'm breaking your records like right over your heads, or like throwing them in the garbage, or lecturing you, or giving you a good beating. Like, he just accepted it because like they're growing up in a America, but it's not for him. But he understood other people were going to do it, and he knew that didn't make his own sons, whom he like knew in and out, like bad people just because they're participating in the modern Western culture he thought was like immoral and stuff. Well, I hate the modern trend of writing by committee. There's a lot of wisdom in running opening pages in a few chapters, like, scenes, whatever, here and there by other writers, to get a feel for how other people perceive the work and see if you're on the right track, or if you need to make some changes, minor or major, and then like you can get a handle on it and like start doing a lot of your own self-editing. Obviously, that's a topic for a whole separate video. Devoid of that isolation, writer friends could have respectfully told him he needed to focus on his fictional ensemble cast, use the real-life historical figures in a more fictionalized way, and sparingly at that. Instead of writing those chapters like nonfiction, it's basically just a dull accounting of their activities at the time. Rewrite conversations to sound natural, like real people having a real conversation, instead of like preachy polemics promoting his own views, just like a whole like 2 pages at a time of talking heads, like blah blah blah. And this is what I think of religion, and this is what's happening politically. Yeah, because we always have conversations with long info dumping monologues, talking uninterrupted for like 30 minutes at a time, and chop out all the research papers, Duma transcripts. Yeah, he really thought that was okay to add, and screenplays. Then he could have easily touched at least 20 years as he planned to, rather than only 3. But you can go see my video about the Red Wheel saga, like, well, I'll be linking to at the end of this video. Aleksandr Isayevich had very compelling reasons to feel he had to isolate himself, but even someone with such an intense mind and incredible brain shouldn't neglect mental self-care. I know people of that generation, he was the greatest generation born in 1918, were of the mindset that tough times should be soldiered through, instead of dwelt on or even considered as traumatic and psychologically damaging. But that doesn't mean the impact of such events like magically disappeared. So thank you guys very much for watching. Let me know down in the comments, have you ever read any of Aleksandr Isayevich's books, or his like short stories, his like plays, any of his like nonfiction works, anything like that? What do you think of him? Do you want me to do some more videos soon, instead of just spacing them out like a couple of months at a time as I have been about him? Because I just love him so much. And like, you can also like check out, I have a playlist I've been started putting together about him. Do you participate in Mental Health May? Like, what are your thoughts about like mental self-care and such like that? Have you struggled with mental health issues? Have you ever like considered like what your own like favorite writers, whom a lot of biographical details about, like what traumatic events, or like just like really like world-shaking events, whatever they lived through, may have impacted their writing or their personal lives, how they saw the world? Have any of your favorite writers dealt with like mental health issues, even if they might not have like at their generation considered it as like something that really like was psychologically affecting them? So just let me know all sorts of those wonderful thoughts about like mental health and Aleksandr Isayevich. I am excited to get back into making more videos again, and I believe this is my first video with my ears up at 3/4 of an inch, which is 19 millimeters. Like, I love this size so much. So thanks again for watching. I will see you guys soon. Bye.